Today's segment of Sound Balming is brought to you by Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Body Care. I cannot express to you how much we love their products. Although we use them all year, as the weather gets colder, we need these products even more. The dreaded drop in temperature, the dryness, the itchiness, and the unnecessary flakiness is inevitable. Shea butter from Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Body Care is the only thing that works for my skin and hair needs. Not only do these products cure my dry skin, the whipped butter goes on smoothly and doesn't leave that uncomfortably thick, sticky residue. Bonus? It smells absolutely amazing. There are so many different scents to choose from too. Not only do they carry skincare products, there are products for authentic living, face, shower, hair and beard, spritzers and perfumes, and bath products. Let me tell you, we cannot even keep the stuff in the studio. The entire production team as well as all our children use Jimmy and Mary's product. Jimmy and Mary's take pride in creating quality, handcrafted products from simple ingredients for the entire family. Their products are made for all skin types and are 100% handmade, 100% vegan, and 100% cruelty-free. Skincare is important. Moisture is key, and keeping our skin and hair hydrated is essential. I cannot emphasize how much we trust Jimmy and Mary's for all of our skincare needs. Hurry on up to jimmyandmarys.com and check out their products. Did I mention service is fast and efficient too? Don't forget to mention that you heard about Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Skincare on Sound Balming. Use the discount code SOUNDBALM20 to get 15% off. That's SOUNDBALM20 for 15% off at Jimmy and Mary's Authentic Skincare.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sound Bombing. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bombs. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Lamar Darnell Shields.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day it is, you are here with me. And who am I? You should know because you clicked on this station. Hey, welcome to my show. I'm Dr. Lamar Darnell Shields, the creator of Sound Bombing. And my goal with this show is to introduce you to people with ideas that will help you unlock your full potential. Now, you're probably like, why is he wearing the gangster vegan t-shirt? Stop being nosy. Stop looking at my wardrobe. I'm going to tell you about why I'm wearing my gangster vegan shirt, okay? Let's get down to it. Interest in plant-based substitutes and cell-based meats, collectively referred to as meat alternatives hereafter, has grown rapidly over the past decade. And while some customers or consumers choose to avoid meat from farmed animals hereafter, farmed meat or animal foods altogether, there's a growing number of people who are replacing a share of their meat intake with plant-based substitutes that seek to approximate the texture, flavor, and or nutrient profiles of farmed meat using ingredients derived from pulses, grains, oils, and other plants and or fungi. Well, my next guest knows what all that stuff means. He's the author of the national bestseller, Clean Meat, How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner and the World, published by Simon & Schuster. He's also the CEO of Better Meat Company and a 4-time TEDx speaker. We have that in common. The host of the business podcast, for good business, for good podcast, and a longtime leader in food sustainability. He founded this company which uses fermentation to turn microbes into meat within hours, creating a far more sustainable and humane method of satisfying our taste buds. He's been interviewed by hundreds of people on all the media outlets from CNN to Star Talk Radio, but you know what? He has not been on Sound Bombing. Did you hear me? He has not been here, but he's been on all the other shows. So who am I talking about? I asked Paul Shapiro to join me today in the bomb shelter. Paul Shapiro, welcome to Sound Bombing. I want you to talk to me about the future of food, but before you do that, let my listeners know where you are calling in from and let us know how you are doing.
Dr. Shields, what a pleasure. Shame on me for not having been on the show before. I take full responsibility and I apologize wholeheartedly. But to answer your question directly, I am calling in from Sacramento, California. And I like to say calling in from the most important city and the most important state in the country. But I am from Maryland, so I understand where you're coming from. That it's a great state too. But I'm glad to be talking with you, man.
Hey, brother. Well, welcome to the show. You know, I typically am working in California. Because of COVID, we're not there. I've worked with several school districts, Paul. Altaloma School District, Pasadena, LA Unified. Do some work in LA Unified, but Pasadena and Altaloma are really the district that we actually work in, man. I'm excited that you're here with me. Didn't get a chance to read the entire book, Clean Meat, but we're going to talk about the book. You and I have so many things in common. Interesting enough, when I was doing my research on you, I heard you were a teenager, a student at the Georgetown Day School in Washington, D.C. 3 weeks ago, I took my kids to Georgetown. We drove past your school. My daughter attends St. Timothy's boarding school for girls. And quite often, you all come up here. They go to parties. Of course, this is pre-COVID and things of that nature. So we have a couple of things in common. And I have so many questions to ask you. I know when you were, I know you founded the company. I know you have a brand new book out. Of course, not a brand new book. Of course, I'm rocking my Gangsta Vegan. I like to tell people, before people were even talking about vegan diets or being a vegetarian, before it was like the thing to be, my hashtag, Paul, is meat free since 93. Now, I need to back up and say where I got that from, because I don't want to get sued by one of my favorite restaurants in Chicago. Shout out to the Great Chicago Diner. Their hashtag is meat free since 83. And so I've been meat free since 93. And I want to talk about my journey. But the show is not about me, brother. The show is about you. I want to hear, how did a teenager at Georgetown Day School in DC create an animal welfare club called Compassion Over Killing? Now, out of all the things that you could have been doing as a teenager, you became compassionate and passionate about saving animals, and then everything happened. Before we get into all the other stuff, man, talk to me about being a teenager and creating an organization at such a young age, and where did that passion come from?
Lamar, it's so funny you mentioned this, because I also went meat free in 93. So I don't know how old you are. You look younger than me, so I don't know. You must have been younger than me.
That's that good vegan diet, brother. You know how we get there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I will just tell you straight up, I'm now 42, but when in 1993, I was 14 years old. And, what happened for me, in all honesty, was a friend of mine showed me this video. It was a video of what happens to animals on these factory farms. And honestly, he wasn't showing it to me because he was trying to, tell me to be a vegetarian or anything like that. He was like, dude, you got to see this. It's sick, right? That was all he wanted to do. And so I watched it, though, and I was really moved by it. And I felt so horribly for these animals that I decided I didn't want to be a part of this. And so I became a vegetarian. And I knew about vegetarianism, but I didn't really know a lot of vegetarians. And so I wrote to the animal welfare organizations and I asked them, do you have any information about vegetarian eating, recipes or whatever? And they sent me back this literature about what at the time, I was reading it and I thought it was vegan. I was like, oh, what is this vegan thing? Veganism. And I just thought, it sounds cool, but I thought, there's no way you can do this. Like it's kind of like holding your breath, right? You can hold your breath for a certain amount of time, but if you do it too long, you're going to die. And I thought maybe you can go for like some amount of time without animal products at all, but you probably will die if you don't. Then I read an interview, and you will probably remember Carl Lewis, but for people who are too young and they don't remember Carl Lewis, he was like the ultimate Olympian of the world back then. He was like my hero.
I spoke at his high school. Well, of course he wasn't there. I would definitely be like, go meat free looking like that. But I spoke at his high school. He's from New Jersey. Yes, definitely know Carl Lewis.
That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, for those who are younger, Carl Lewis was kind of like the American Usain Bolt, of his era. Like he was like the top athlete, top in the world. He was the fastest man in the world. And I worshiped him. I had a big poster of him in my room. Like I really thought Carl Lewis was like a god. And I read this interview in which he talked about how his veganism actually helped his Olympic performance. And so now here I was thinking, of course I was a young teenager, but I was thinking, it's not healthy to do. And then the person who's like the greatest athlete of the era is doing it. I thought, wow. And crediting his gold medals to it. I was like, it's really incredible. So at that point, I was like, well, if Carl Lewis is a vegan, I'm a vegan. And, 28 years later, I'm still doing it.
So what is the message behind the name of compassion over killing?
Yeah. So, I was in high school, there was no animal protection club. And I really felt like these animals who we use for food were being given a pretty raw deal, right? Like, we do the things to them that we wouldn't do to the most heinous criminals. We wouldn't take like murderers and rapists and put them in prison cells where they can't even move their whole lives, right? Where they can't even lift their arms, so they can't turn around, where they're just immobilized in like a coffin their whole lives. Yet that's what we routinely do to pigs and to chickens. And I just thought, this is horrible. And it wasn't just that we were killing them. It was also that we were really tormenting them throughout their lives. And so I decided, there's no club in the high school. There were clubs for everything, it seemed, and there wasn't a club for animals. And so I started this thing called Compassion Over Killing. And the message was that instead of killing these animals, we ought to be compassionate to them. We ought to put compassion over killing. And so over time, it grew to be beyond a high school club, and it quickly became more of like a Washington, D.C. wide organization, and then eventually a national organization. And even today, I left it in 2005, but today they've continued to grow the organization and have offices on both coasts, and they're doing a good job. So I'm very proud of that legacy. But, the basic premise of it was, if you have a choice to be compassionate or to kill, that it's better to be compassionate. And the animals have no choice. We chain them, we cage them, we beat them, we brand them, we do all these horrible things to them, and they don't have any choice in the matter. Like they are at our mercy. They can't fight back. They can't resist. They are just subject to whatever violence we inflict on them. And as a result, I just think, we ought to show some restraint. That the power that we have over animals should be restrained, and we ought to show them some kindness. And so that's why I started down this path and really devoted my life to trying to help give these animals a voice.
Now, I'm a little older than you, but what I know that has not changed, and I went to a very similar school like you, but in Chicago. And I went to an all-boys school, so I'm about to go somewhere with this. You were so advanced. So how did your peers treat you? How did they engage you when you said, so you got the basketball club, you got the tennis club, you got the jockey club, you got the video game club, and then all of a sudden my man Paul says, let's start the animal rights activism, compassion for animals. Talk to me about you as a kid, and then where did you get the gall to say that at 13, 14, 15 that I'm going to do this? Because I know how hard young people, listen, children have not changed a whole lot. You know what I mean? There's a lot of kids that are compassion like you, but I also know you were from DC, brother. So you were from a city that has some strong roots. Talk to me about your peers when you started this, and then maybe give me some background on maybe your family or community that really inspired you, because this is a very inspirational story. And we're going to get to all the other things, but I think what people may not know, and you probably like, man, this dude went real deep to find out who I am, because you have the book and the company and all those things, but you were doing this before it was like the thing to do. You know what I mean? Like before it was like Jay-Z and Beyonce. You know what I mean? Jay-Z. You said Carl Lewis. Even Carl Lewis wasn't Jay-Z and Beyonce. You had to know who that was. So tell me about your peers, and then tell me about maybe your upbringing that really helped shape this this, not only this active, this entrepreneur, but this activist as well?
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with my mom, honestly, Lamar. She was like a huge dog lover, right? She worked at our local animal shelter, and she, to her, being an animal lover really meant being a dog lover, but still that was enough for me, because what I kept thinking when I would watch these videos about what happens to animals in slaughterhouses and so on was, what if those were my dogs? If they were my dogs, there's nothing I wouldn't do to stop that from happening to them. And if I wouldn't want that to happen to my own dogs, why would I want it to happen to any animal? There's not a lot of difference between pigs and dogs, honestly. They're really not that dissimilar. And so I already had this feeling like I had these dogs who were part of my family. My mom had really stressed being compassionate to animals or to dogs. And these dogs we had were like my siblings. I truly didn't view them as like pieces of property. I viewed them like my brothers and sisters. And as a result, I just felt like I could connect with these other animals as well. And that you're right, Lamar. Like I can tell you, there are some people in like my peer group who were not exactly, as enthusiastic as I was. I'll just put it that way. But
that's such a great Georgetown prep response. They weren't as enthusiastic as I was.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, like I did find like my own community, like kids often separate themselves into groups of people who were like them. And I did find like a subgroup of people who shared my concern. And those became my friends. So people who I was good friends with in 8th grade, I wasn't such good friends with in 9th grade because of this, frankly. And I got more and more involved in animal protection work and started getting jobs at like vegan organizations, and it just became my life. I mean, honestly, it was like, to the point where now I don't even think about it. It's like so much a part of me that I don't even think like it's not when people ask, oh, is it difficult to be vegan? It's like I don't even contemplate it. It's so not difficult because it's so much a part of my life that it would be like unfathomable to me to not do it.
Same here. People would drop, don't put that meat in front of him. I'm like, I'm so cool. Listen, I've traveled all over the country, and one thing I don't debate anymore really is religion and food. And I grew up, I went to school in the South. I don't get into those debates. You know the history of the South food, not only just people of color, but just people in general when it comes to food. I got an early lesson learned when I was in college, just young boy from up north talking to these barbers. I was in the barber trying to have a conversation about religion and diet. And listen, that we lost that fight. So let's get down to it, man. You talked about this need. I know there's a need out there. What is the problem, though, with our existing food system that needs addressing? You saw an issue when you 12, 13, 14 in DC, Georgetown Prep. So what is the problem existing right now with our food system that needs to be addressing, and how are you addressing that particular need?
Sure, Lamar. So, let's just back up. Like the planet isn't getting any bigger, right? The planet is staying the same size, but humanity's footprint on the planet is getting a lot bigger. And a primary way that we leave that footprint is through our food print, principally in the amount of meat that we eat. Now, you already know this, but it just takes a lot more land, a lot more water, a lot more greenhouse gas emissions and more to raise and slaughter animals for food than it does to eat plants directly. So not only is it bad for the animals, but it's bad for the planet and for us to be raising all these animals for food. But the human population continues rising. We have about 7.8 billion of us today, and demographers project that by the next 30 years, we're going to add 2 billion more people. So we're going to have nearly 10 billion of us. So you think about that, like we're going to have 10 billion humans walking around, but the planet isn't getting any bigger. So where are we going to get all the land to raise all these animals for all these people who are going to come onto the planet who are going to want to eat meat? Well, we could just hope that they're going to do what you and I do, Lamar, and just not eat animals. That would be great. But right now, we know meat demand is rising, not falling. Meat demand on a per person basis is going up in China, in India, in Brazil, and all the places where it's going to matter the most in the future. Meat demand is rising, not falling. And so the question is, like, can we help them satisfy their meat tooth, so to speak, without the need to raise animals? And so it's kind of like, if you think about when you flick a light switch on in a room, you're not thinking about whether that light is coming from coal or whether it's coming from oil or whether it's coming from solar or wind. You just want light. You just want the experience of an illuminated room. Well, similarly, when people eat meat, I don't think they're thinking to themselves, I'm so glad an animal was slaughtered for this. They're not thinking about it. They're not thinking, they just want the experience that they enjoy about eating meat. And I believe that in the same way that we can produce light without fossil fuels, we can produce the meat experience without animals. And that's what we're trying to do. There's a whole movement of people now who are trying to create ways to produce meat or a meat experience without the need to raise and slaughter animals. And that's what my book, Clean Meat, is about. That's what my company, The Better Meat Co., is trying to do. And that's what a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs and investors are seeking to do as well, because we have to free humanity from our reliance on the exploitation of animals. We cannot sustainably feed humanity into the future this way, and we need to get better. We need to produce more with less, and that means not going big with animal agriculture, but really going small with cellular agriculture, microbial fermentation, and other ways to produce a lot of food with very few resources.
So I know you have a proprietary fermented fungi-based protein. I think, is it called Rhiza or Rhiza?
If you're a Wu-Tang fan, you can say Rizza, but the actual way that we is Rhiza.
Man, I love you already, brother. He said if you are a Wu-Tang fan, it's Rizza. I love. So what is Rizza? No, what is Rhiza, and what are the benefits of it?
So Rhiza is a microbial protein that we produce through fermentation here in our Sacramento fermentation facility. And so think about it like this. Think about it like this, Lamar. A cow eats grass, and they convert that grass into a steak, but it takes more than a year, right? Well, we have little microscopic fungi, and we feed them potatoes, and they convert that into something that really does look like a steak. But instead of it happening within a year, it happens within hours. Now, there's a lot of difference, though, between our steak and a cow's steak. Not only was there no animal suffering associated with it, but our steak has more protein than eggs, more iron than beef, more potassium than bananas, more fiber than oats. It naturally contains vitamin B12 because it's a product of microbial fermentation, and it is delicious. And so when you eat it, you really are getting that meat experience without the need for animals, and you can produce it much faster. So Rhiza is what we call our Myco Protein, where we are basically taking, again, microscopic fungi, feeding the potatoes, and within hours getting a product that really does look and taste like animal meat, except without animals at all.
So what about people like me? So I've been a vegan for a very long time, and one of the things that I sort of struggle with are the fake meats, the fake chickens, the fake turkeys, the fake so-and-so. And then people then typically say, well, if you're doing the fake, why don't you eat, which is a crazy argument. If you're going to do a fake burger, then eat the real burger. First of all, that makes no sense. Be real clear. But what about those individuals like me who sort of like plant-based, who really, I don't want to do the meats. I don't want the fake meats. I don't want to do the fake chickens. What are your thoughts about that group of people?
Sure. Well, I'm in that group of people, actually, but so I'm with you. I think the longer that you're vegan, the less you want it. However, let me address the first point, which I know you're not making, but people do make it, which is, why do you want something that looks like meat if you don't want to eat meat? Well, that's like saying, well, why do you want a Tesla, if it doesn't use fossil fuels, right? Like, you want the experience of driving a car without the need to use gasoline. That's why you're doing it. So, most people who don't eat meat don't avoid meat because they don't like the taste of it. They don't eat meat because they don't like the negative health effects, or they don't like the way the planet is treated or the animals are treated. Like, they're eating it because of some other reason aside from that they don't like the taste. So, if you can create light from solar as opposed to light from coal, surely that's better. Well, same thing. If you can produce meat without animals, it's better. So I wouldn't even worry about that. But look, I think there's a good portion of people who are like you and me, Lamar, who have been vegan for so long that they just think, I don't really care. I'm happy to eat bean and rice burritos. I'm happy to eat lentil soup. I'm happy to eat hummus sandwiches. Like, those are great. I love that. I'd be thrilled. If I went to a party and that's all they had, I would be telling my wife, we got to come back here, Like, that is just what I like to eat. And I don't mind eating the plant-based meats every once in a while. Like, I'm happy to. I think they taste fine, but I don't need it. And I know you don't need it either. But you and I are in a tiny little minority, tiny minority. Most people want meat. Most people want to eat meat, and they want to eat meat as often as possible. And for those people, we need to replicate it. There might be people who say, hey, I don't need to drive. I can just bike and walk everywhere. But most people want to drive. And so for them, it's important to have electric cars. Similarly, I think for most people who want meat, we need to be able to produce meat without animals. And that's the real goal of what we're seeking to do here.
So how easy or how hard is it to get, or to get government approval to bring sort of more of these products to the market?
It depends on the organisms that you use. So, if you're using something, let's say like a conventional plant protein, it is pretty easy. If though you're trying to grow real animal meat from animal cells as opposed to animal slaughter, which is the topic of my book, Clean Meat, that's a lot harder. The US government hasn't approved the sale of that yet. However, at the Better Meat Co., we're using microscopic fungi that have actually been consumed by humanity safely for centuries. And so while we do want to cross our T's and dot our I's with regard to regulatory approval, we actually feel quite confident that because this is not novel to the diet of humanity, because humans have been eating this organism for so long, it's not so much a problem for us. But there are other companies in the space that are using more novel organisms, and they have to go through the Food and Drug Administration to make sure that they are using only ingredients that are safe to eat.
So how different or how similar is your company or your product compared to like Beyond Meat, all the other, corn is another product. I mean, there's so many different products. Let me just tell you, Paul, I'm so OG in this, man. I used to make burgers in a box. Like you would get a box, you would go to the health food. That's when the health food stores were really small. You would add all this water and you make this, and you pretended like it was like, oh, this was so great. I remember early on, I remember reading an article by the actress Lynn Redgrave. And she talked about she didn't even say vegan, but like a vegetarian, she was like OG 70s and 80s. I was like, man, what were they doing? But they always had these small sort of grocery stores that exist. Are you seeing, how is your product, stack up compared to some of the other products that we're actually seeing out there? And especially I'm seeing it grow and grow and grow.
Yeah. Well, dude, I'll tell you what's funny is I remember back in '93, I would go to one of those little tiny co-ops, and they had this thing called Better Than Milk, which was a cardboard container that contained soy milk powder. It wasn't liquid. It was just a powder. And you would have to put that in water and like shake it up and that's how you would get milk, was by using this thing called Better Than Milk. So I'm with you. I remember those days very well. But, let's go back. So the very first recipe for plant-based meat ever goes all the way back to the 900s, more than 1,000 years ago. In ancient China, where there were a lot of Buddhists, and so they were making plant-based meat. Then you fast forward until the 1800s in the United States, and you started seeing people like John Harvey Kellogg and Sylvester Graham of Kellogg cereal and Graham crackers is how we now know them. But back then, they started really making plant-based meat, and that was the first real effort to commercialize a product that was considered a meat substitute. And actually in 1899, John Harvey Kellogg was the first person to ever patent a formula for a plant-based meat. Then you fast forward until like the 70s and the 80s, and you start having companies like Light Life and Tofurky coming onto the scene. And then, you get into the 90s, and then you and I are eating Boca burgers. And then you come up until about 5 years ago. And instead of companies like Light Life, which were trying at that time to create meat alternatives for vegetarians, you have companies like Beyond and Impossible that are trying to create meat alternatives for meat eaters. And that's their real goal now, is how do you create a plant-based meat that tastes identical to animal-based meat? And that has really transformed the game and launched the category, because vegetarians are a very small portion of the population, whereas meat eaters are nearly everybody. So that's like the trajectory that we've seen. Now, to answer your question directly about the Better Meat Co., one difference is that we're an ingredients company. So we are not a branded product that you're going to see on the store shelf. We're an ingredient provider to companies like these other companies. But the difference of what we're doing is most of them are using plant proteins. They use soy protein, they use wheat protein, they use pea protein. We don't use plant proteins. We use microbial fermentation. So we are not using plants, we are using microbes. And that fermentation process allows us to create something that is a whole food, all natural, far less processed product. So if you think about like, how do you make plant-based meat today? You've got to grow a field of peas, harvest the field, mill it into a flour, isolate it, fractionate it, remove the fiber, remove the fat. Then you've got to extrude it, which is a fancy way of saying lots of pressure and heat to change the structure of the protein to make it more animal-like. Whereas what we do is we run a fermentation, we pull it out of the fermenter and remove the water, and that's the final thing. So like our product is just a more natural whole food product than some of the foods that you see now. And that's not to knock them. I enjoy eating Beyond Burgers as an example. But it is to say that our ingredients are just a different category of ingredients.
Well, as I said before the show aired, before we started talking in the green room, I talked about your book. I didn't read the entire book, but I got through a nice amount of the book is called Clean Meat, How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner and the World. In that book, you share some stories of business activists in your book, and I think it's really, really fascinating and inspiring. Do you have a favorite story in that book that sort of just stands out to you that you like, man, this is that one story? And no disrespect to all the other people who are sharing their stories, but there's always this one story that sort of resonates with you. Share that story and then why that one sort of jumped out at you.
Yeah, sure. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. So there's lots of cool entrepreneurs and investors who I talk about in the book, but really I'm inspired by the story of these two dudes, Parimal Gandhi and Ryan Pandya. And these are these two guys who were in their early 20s. They had never met each other. They were introduced by email and they set up a video chat. And they both had landed on this interesting idea to try to make dairy proteins without cows. So I don't mean like alternatives to dairy. I mean real dairy proteins without cows. And the way you do that is through fermentation. So, like think about it. If you take, let's say, a brewer's yeast, you take that yeast, you feed it sugar, it consumes the sugar, and then it excretes alcohol, and that's how you get beer and wine. Or if you take baker's yeast, you feed it sugar, it produces CO2, which leavens your bread and makes it rise. That's why bread rises from yeast. So what they thought was, why don't we get a yeast and program that yeast to produce not alcohol or not CO2, but actual like whey protein. And they thought this should be technologically feasible to do. They started video chatting about it and they said, hey, let's start a company together to do this. And they both were like, had other offers, they had job offers they were going to do. But instead they thought, let's start a company together. Very risky thing to do because 9 out of 10 startups fail. Whereas the other job you get with somebody else is a far more secure job. So they start it without having ever met each other in person. And they start this company. Now you fast forward to today, which is now 7 years later. And these guys have raised about $500 million of investor money. The Wall Street Journal reported that their company right now has a valuation of $1.5 billion, and they are still in their 20s. So these guys who had nearly no experience, had never met, decided based on video chats to start their own company that now 7 years later is worth $1.5 billion. And they're still in their 20s. It's an incredible story about really having the ambition and resilience to say, yes, we can, and to keep moving forward and create something out of nothing that now is really a valuable company doing really cool things in the world. So I really admire what Parimal and Ryan have accomplished, and I'm rooting hard for their success. And you can go out and you can now buy their ice cream. It's called Brave Robot. It's vegan ice cream that is made with animal-free whey. It's really an incredible story.
Thanks for sharing that story, but also just thanks for saying the product because I'm very familiar with that product. I know mission is very important with you. Mission is very important to you after going through your book and knowing about what you did when you were a student at Georgetown. What would you say is the mission behind your product, and what makes not only your product so different and your mission different compared to other people that are out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole reason I'm doing this is to help animals and the planet. Like that's the bottom line. That's why I started this company. It's why I wrote the book. It's the animating force of my life. William Wilberforce, who was one of the great abolitionists and anti-slavery crusaders of the 19th century, led the fight.
I want to stop you. There's a historically black college named after him in Ohio, Wilberforce University. So some of my folks who went to historically black colleges like I did, they would know who he was. But go ahead, finish with your story.
Oh, that's cool. Which HBCU did you go to, Lamar?
I went to Grambling State University in Louisiana, and Wilberforce is actually in Ohio.
Oh, interesting. So, I didn't really know that there was a college named after him, but that's awesome. Well, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that.
So you can add that to your story.
I will. So, this guy was, he led the fight in Britain to abolish slavery, and he was lampooned. He was criticized. He was completely, vilified. throughout his life, and finally that he succeeded. And after he, along with numerous other people who were fighting with him, ended the slave trade in the British Empire, he ended up becoming like a very passionate animal activist. And he was like a founding member of the RSPCA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And he had this quote. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me. But he said, actually, you know what? Let me just pull it up. I'll get here real quick. Yeah, I will, because it's so powerful, and it reminds me of myself. Not that I would be so hubristic as to think that I am in any way comparable to him. All right. So William Wilberforce said, "If to be feelingly alive to the sufferings of my fellow creatures is to be a fanatic, I am one of the most incurable fanatics ever permitted to be at large." And that's how I feel. Like I feel in the same way that Wilberforce was accused of being a race traitor. He was accused of being a fanatic. He was lampooned. People told me he should be in prison. I feel like, my life is devoted to trying to help these animals who cannot fight for themselves. And that is the entire mission of what I'm seeking to do with my life. I'm very fortunate because the person I married shares that same passion. So she's in fact a vegan cookbook author. So I don't have to worry that in my domestic life this will present any challenges. But I hope that at the end of my life that if anybody is ever saying anything about me, that they'll say, the world is a better place because I lived, that there was less suffering in the world and more happiness in the world because I lived. And I feel like what I'm doing can help contribute to that. And that's the purpose of the company. And I just want to work with people who have that same mission, because there's a lot of things we can do in this world, a lot of ways that we can spend the very brief glimmer of existence that we have. And I want to make sure that my brief time alive on this earth is not spent in vain, but rather is spent trying to do something really meaningful by reducing the vast amount of misery that is.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing your mission, your goal, and why you're doing this. And so there's a group of people listening who aren't really concerned about the vegan diet as much. There's a group of people who aren't really concerned about how you're making this, but there's a group of people who are listening, Paul, who wants to know how you've grown your business. So what is one strategy that has helped you grow your business? And then what is your hope for the future of your company and your particular product as well?
Sure. Well, I'm actually probably the least qualified person to work at this company who works here. So, people who work here are amazing scientists, right? You're talking about microbiologists, chemical engineers, fermentation scientists, mechanical engineers, and so on. And so the secret to our success that we've had so far, I really believe, is that we've hired people who are really smart and know a lot more than I do. That's the goal, is to hire people who know a lot more than I do. And we have, I think, done a great job of assembling a world-class team that is doing really big things on very little money. Now, at the same time, we also have decided to partner with big companies. Our goal is to help the food industry use fewer animals. And so we've grown the business not by trying to create our own brand and selling our own products to compete against others, but really by selling ingredients to really big food companies to help them reduce their footprint on the planet. So we're partnered with really big food companies who want to make plant-based meat. For an example, think about Hormel Foods. Hormel is like this hugely recognizable brand name. They make Spam, they make other products, but they have a new plant-based meat line, and we're a supplier to them. And so our goal is to make sure that we can help the big food companies use fewer animals. And that's how we've grown our business, is with a B2B model as opposed to a branded model.
So why did you decide to go that route? Why did you decide not to come out with, like, say, a plant-based burger instead of creating a product for those larger companies?
If you think about the 1848 gold rush in California, most of the gold rushers didn't really make much, but the people who did were the people who were selling pickaxes and shovels and jeans. Like, those are the people who were selling
jeans. Paul, jeans have been around forever. It's funny you say that. That's interesting. You got a gold rush. Let me come up with some jeans the chaps. Let me come up with some chaps.
Yeah. So it wasn't
the people, it was the other products that were there, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so all these people are looking for gold, but the people who made the most money were the people who were B2B sellers to them. Well, there's a huge gold rush in the plant-based meat space right now. Hundreds of companies are formed, but most of them will fail. And I think we have a much better chance of succeeding when we are the pickaxes and shovel sellers than we, as opposed to just trying to be somebody else looking for the gold. So I think not only do we have a better chance economically, but I also think we can do more good in the world. By helping Hormel, this massive food company, use fewer animals, we can do a lot more good than trying to compete against Beyond Meat, right? Like it's not our goal. Our goal is tangibly cut down the number of animals being used for food. And that is better achieved by selling ingredients, I think.
I love it. One other quick question. I just thought about this when you talked about your company and you talked about me, you saying I'm not the smartest person. You have all these scientists and all these engineers. Would you say that the new farmers would be considered scientists? Because when you think of the concept of a farmer and the farmer's home, red house, and things of that nature, would you say that the image of the farmer is shifting? And if so, how is it shifting? Because listening to you talk about chemicals, and I mean not much as chemicals, but you're talking about understanding science and all those things. Is the new farmer changing?
Yeah, absolutely. So farming isn't done today the way that it was 20 years ago, and 20 years from now, it's not going to be done the same as it is today. And food production has become increasingly enhanced by modern science and technology, to the point where now we have foods that are far more convenient for us than they were in the past. And that's going to happen still in the future. And so we'll still have farming, but it's just going to be very different. I've joked that sometimes you see bumper stickers that say something like, "Enjoy eating, thank a farmer." Well, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we have bumper stickers say like, "Enjoy eating, thank a scientist," because increasingly, in order to save the planet, we're going to have to apply a lot more science and technology to how we produce food. The key to saving the planet is not to return to 19th century methods of agriculture; it's to embrace 21st century methods, and that's how we're going to produce a lot more food with far fewer resources and be able to sustainably feed humanity in the future.
So are you concerned that some scientists are going very extreme, mixing too much stuff, that then we're not creating real food? Because we know that there's some fruits and vegetables that aren't the original fruit and vegetable. It's like there's this huge debate. Someone, sent me a message because they know I'm serious about my health and wellness. So someone said to me, "Where can I get watermelon with seeds?" And I didn't think about it. I have yet to see many watermelons with seeds. When I was a kid, I did. But go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Yeah, well, first of all, you make a very good point, because it's an example of an extremely unnatural food is the seedless watermelon. Like, how would that ever evolve? It didn't. In fact, if you read about the mutagenesis that's required to make a seedless watermelon, it's a pretty insane process.
And I want my listeners to stay in contact with you. I want them to get a copy of your book. So before you leave, and you can't leave yet because the second part of the show is called the Super Bomb Question, which is brought to us by Mountain Made. But before we get to that, let my listeners know how they can get in contact with you, Paul, and how can they get a copy of your book. I love the book. The cover is like an old, you go to a butcher and you get your thing wrapped up in that paper. Yeah. It's wrapped up in there. How can they get a copy of the book? And then if they want to have more conversation with you, if they want to find out more about your products, how can they do that as well?
Well, thanks, Marla. That's really kind of you. So you can get the book Clean Meat anywhere where books are sold, including Amazon. Or if you want to go to the book's official website, you can go to cleanmeat.com. Again, that's cleanmeat.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, check out bettermeat.co. Again, that's bettermeat.co. And you can just get in touch with me through the contact form there. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts, if you want to partner with us, if you want to help us achieve the mission in some way to create a better world, a better food supply, I want to hear from you. So please reach out. It would be great to hear from you.
I love it, Paul. Well, you can't leave just yet. The second part of the show is called the Super Bomb Question, which is brought to us by Mountain Made. The difference from this segment is that I'm going to ask you a short question. I need you to respond as quickly as possible. First word or statement that comes to your mind. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. And for listeners, know this is authentic. I do not know about what the questions are. So you're going to hear very quick responses that are the first words that come to my mind. So let's do it, Lamar.
Let's go. What's your favorite word?
Progress.
All right. You gave me your favorite quote, so I'm going to let that one go. That was a quote by Will before, so we're going to let it go. What's your superpower?
Resilience.
What's your spirit animal?
My dog Eddie. He's a wonderful pit bull, and if you want to check out his exploits, he has an Instagram account, and it's called. He's on Instagram at Eddie the Pity. It's EDDIE the Pity. So check him out.
I like that. What moves you to tears of joy?
Seeing the responses from people at meat companies when they taste our product and say that they can't tell the difference. When I see that, and I think these guys know meat, and see them saying that they can't tell any difference, that is the greatest compliment I could ever see.
What moves you to tears of sorrow?
Seeing the callous ways that humans treat other animals. I think about it all the time. It weighs on me greatly, and knowing that we are ushering thousands of species into the final extinction graveyard because of our careless ways just is something that I lament all the time. And I just think, what do these animals do? Like, all they're trying to do is just make a living, and they were born onto this planet, and because they weren't born human, we treat them as if they were just pieces of property, or even worse, and we subject them to treatment that is almost unspeakable. So I think about that very regularly, and I hope that my life can be some type of resistance against it.
What do you wish you had more time to do?
Honestly, my favorite thing to do, Lamar, is to hang out with my wife and my dog. So I wish that I had time to go for more walks with them.
I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What values do you live by every single day?
I try just to go for continuous improvement. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to make errors. I've done things that I regret, and I'm sure I will in the future do other things that I regret. But the goal is continuous improvement, to see how can we keep on getting better and doing more. Life is one big experiment where we're just trying to get by. None of us have the answers. None of us know everything. We're just trying to get by and do what we can to leave the world better than how we found it. And so what I am trying to do every day is wonder, how can I do better today than yesterday?
Besides your book, what book or books have you given most as a gift, and why?
This is an interesting question, because recently I read this amazing novel, and I don't read a lot of novels. I often read nonfiction, but there's a book. It's in English. The title is Tender is the Flesh. It's written by an Argentinian woman whose name I'm not sure I remember right now, but it's called Tender is the Flesh. And it is a spectacular novel. I don't even want to tell. All I'll say is that it's a world in which subclasses of humans take the place of other animals, and they're used accordingly. So I'd say that. And then probably, I wouldn't say I've given it as a gift, but the book that I have recommended time and time again to people is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It's one of the great examples of how literature actually changed the world. Most of the time when you look at when you look at books that change the world, a lot of the times they turn out to be stories. They turn out to be novels. They're not necessarily nonfiction books. And so Uncle Tom's Cabin is a perfect example of this, that by Harriet Beecher Stowe's writing this novel, she really did help pave the way to the end of slavery in the U.S. It wasn't the only contributing factor. There were many other things that happened. But when Lincoln met her, when she came to the White House, he said, so you're the great lady who started this whole Civil War. And I think what a power to have, that she just wrote this book that literally helped lead to a civil war, which ultimately led to the end of this abomination of human chattel in the United States. And so I recommend reading it, not only because it's a good story, but also just from the historical perspective of how literature can actually foment social movements and change society.
Great book. Her neighbor was Mark Twain. I visited her house in Connecticut. They live next door to one another, because I'm a huge Mark Twain fan. Final question for my brother, Paul Shapiro. If you were in the Mr. America talent competition, what would your talent be?
Oh, well, okay. Before I answer that, I guess I gotta go back. So, sadly, Harriet Beecher Stowe suffered from dementia toward the end of her life, and Mark Twain would go over to her house to tend to her. And really interestingly, she had forgotten that she had written Uncle Tom's Cabin, and she ended up rewriting it And he would come over there and find her, and she would be like furiously writing this book, saying that she had to finish this book on Uncle Tom's Cabin, not knowing that she already written. So when she was suffering from dementia, she ended up rewriting large portions of the book. And amazingly, they are almost verbatim what she wrote the first time around. Really incredible.
Wow. So we both got a little, I call it miscellaneous BS, you know, those little things that nobody really knows. So finish out with me, Paul. If you were in the Mr. America talent competition, what would your talent be? But thanks for that trivia piece right there.
So realistically, I wish I could say sprinting, because I do a lot of sprinting, but my 100 meter is totally unimpressive. It's about, my 100 meter is 14 seconds. And for somebody who's 42 years old, that's okay, but it's still nothing to brag about. So, I would definitely not be sprinting as much as I wish that it were. Honestly, what I think that it would just be tenacity. Some people hit their head against the wall and they just stop because, they're afraid their head's going to break. I just won't stop until the wall breaks. That's just the end of it. So I will never give up. I will always keep trying to do something in this world that will be. And I think tenacity would be the one thing that I might be able to compete on. Everything else, I don't know. But tenacity, that would be it.
Well, Paul, I appreciate your fighting spirit. I appreciate you starting very, very young and finding your passion at a very young age when many of us don't really know what we want to do. So thanks for hanging out with me. Listen, pick up his book. I'm telling you, national bestseller, Clean Meat, How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner, and great company, Clean Meat. Paul, thanks for hanging out with me, brother.
Lamar, you're the man. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you. I hope when you're out in California next, you'll come stay with us in Sacramento. Come take a tour of what I call the Willy Wonka of meat. Come get a tasting. Come hang out at my house. Would love to get to chill with you.
Well, I will definitely take you up on that. My good friend who's a professor at Sacramento State out there, Dr. Alan Green, would love to see me. I haven't seen him in years. We were professors at Johns Hopkins together. Actually, he was a professor before I was. So shout out to Dr. Alan Green. Thanks for hanging out with me. I also want to thank my amazing super duper producer, Nicole Klimpaka Supremacy, for that dope music that you hear in the background all the time at the beginning and the end of the show. But I got to thank all of you for listening. Listen, don't stop listening. But if you want to know more about me, go to drlds.com. But if you want to know about all the things that we're doing, check us out. Share us with all of your friends. We're on every social media, but beyond that, do something for someone other than yourself today. You've been listening to Sound Bombing. Peace. Take care.
The Super Balm questions are brought to you by Mountain Made CBD. Mountain Made is changing the CBD game by offering a line of high-dose CBD tablets at an affordable price. Their products are THC-free and third-party tested for accuracy, cleanliness, and potency. Their products, which ship nationwide, include Build for CBD saturation, Boost for precision titration, and Recover for rest and rehab. With 9 years experience in hemp and fitness, Mountain Made's founders are focused on creating a quality product to help those who live an activated lifestyle. Check out mountainmade.life. Again, that's mountainmade.life to find out more about how their products can help you crush life. Remember, their products ship nationwide. Go check out their website today and follow them on social media at Mountain Made. That's the @ MNTMADE. Our staff at Sound Bombing uses Build before a morning workout, which helps to push our bodies to a whole new level on a daily basis. Try Build, try Boost, try Recover. Our staff is using these products to enhance our active lifestyle naturally, and we are crushing life with Mountain Made CBD, and you can too. Start today by going to mountainmade.life and ordering Build, Boost, Recover, or the multitude of other products that they have which will enhance your lifestyle. I promise you, you won't regret it.